Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. One of the things that we're trying to do with all the sessions is to record them. And with a room this size, if you ask a question, the question will not be on the recording. So we want to make sure that we get those recordings. So just raise your hand and I'll run the microphone to you. With that, I'd like to introduce Matthew Pahl, and he's got a background in signals and military, but there's a lot of some of the threats that he's going to talk about.
Thanks, appreciate it. So I didn't realize how an event like this could accelerate one's heart rate so fast, but mine's going about 200 beats a minute, so hey, that's fine. I'm up here just to talk about when you have threats in the environment that are not breaches. So threats like the last speaker was talking about that are misconfigurations or old devices, and they're causing shenanigans on your network. And so moving forward. Okay, that concludes the talk. Just a little technical help, please. This is, yeah. Hey, thanks. You try it. Just imagine, I want everybody to close their eyes and imagine the most amazing thing they can think of and then double it. That's the talk right now. Just, okay, yeah, who am I? Who am I? I don't know who I am. So my name is Matthew Pahl. I am a detection engineer for a company called Dragos. Thank you.
Big green one.
Did it? Which? Yeah, that one.
Big green one.
Yeah, I use that.
Okay.
My thumb's not strong enough.
Try it.
Oh, yeah, why this? Okay, great, yeah. So I work for a company called Dragos. You might have heard of Dragos. I'm a detection engineer there. I've been working there for 4.5 years. I LARP as a detection engineer at Dragos. I'm not actually an engineer. I started life, as he said, as a signals intercept operator linguist in the US Navy. And I fell into detection engineering when I absolutely love it, as it turns out. It's really good to be here back in the Lone Star State. I live in Northwest Arkansas in the woods with the Lone Star ticks. You guys don't want to mess with those, I can guarantee that. So why am I doing this talk? So we've talked to a lot of customers, and I've talked to a few, they don't let me talk to customers. I've talked to a few customers. I've talked to people who talk to customers, and the customers are all saying a lot of the same things. The first alert that we get that a device has gone offline is when the device has gone offline. Okay, that's a good alert. The first alert that we get that a device has degraded performance is when the device has degraded performance. That's probably a good signal. And then so the question is begged, can you detect the network conditions which can infer that a device is going to have problems? And I'm like, as a detection engineer, my first response is, I don't know, maybe, let's see. So give me some PCAPs. So I went back to our customer representatives and some of the customers, and I said, okay, can you give me a list of like maybe 20 scenarios where you're getting affected by things on the network and you'd want a detection for that. So these shenanigans turning up. And so they came back with a list, about 20 things, 18. I picked 5 of them, and that's constitutes this talk. So the main takeaway from this talk that I would like everybody to take away is I work for Dragos, that's not the main takeaway, but we have a platform, that's not the main takeaway. This talk is about using open source tools, Suricata, as an intrusion detection system for detecting threats that aren't intrusions and porting them over into open source tools like Elasticsearch, which are purpose-built for such a thing. So what do you need? So I talked about Suricata. I use Suricata 8. Why Suricata 8? Suricata 7's okay. Suricata 8 better because it can get layer 2 traffic. It can see the MAC addresses on layer 2. For anybody who hasn't used Suricata, it uses very robust rules. Those rules are going to match against content in the packets. If you have encrypted protocols, it's not going to work for you. It does high-speed processing. You're going to have to stick it on a sensor on a span port. Or in my case, I put it on my Windows machine and ran traffic through that. And then I use Wazoo. Has anybody, who here has not heard of Wazoo? That's a very intelligent crowd here. You guys know a lot. It's an open source, so it's an open source SIM. It's basically Elasticsearch. That's really what it is, but it's so cool because it has all the Wazoo configuration file, the osec.conf configuration file. It can take logs from almost, well, a lot of different sources, and it's got pre-built visualizations for all of those sources. It blew me away. Before I started using Wazoo, I had a full head of hair. It all fell out because I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked how good Wazoo was. On my setup, I had, like I mentioned, I had Suricata 8 on Windows. I had Wazoo is running in a Docker container on Windows. You take Wazoo has an agent. So I put that agent on Windows, but in a Suricata sensor, you'd put the agent on a Suricata sensor. It tails the Eve JSON, the alert log, and it sends it back to Wazoo for their visualization, which is really cool. And then you have this Elastic Stack, which Wazoo is relabeled OpenSearch. Fine. So that's, on my machine on the left, that's Wazoo. It's Elasticsearch. It's Wazoo, right? And then that's not my dashboard. I found this on a medium.com article. This is from somebody named Gilbin K. John. That's not my dashboard. Okay, I got that on the internet. But look, it's like they're doing vulnerability management on the lower left, and they're doing, they've got sysmon alerts on the bottom right from an agent on a machine that sent it to Wazoo. It's like, man, this blows my mind. This is really cool. And then I'm doing it from Suricata, so you got host, you got vulnerability, you got network. It's kind of crazy. So, if you have these problems and you can't afford a platform, you can fire up Suricata, Wazoo, and maybe make this work, right? So these 5 scenarios that I picked, the first one is a flapping host. So this is a fun one. It starts a connection, a 3-way handshake. Before it completes the 3-way handshake, it tears it down. Multicast storm, it sends a flood of multicast packets and overwhelms the network within seconds. I'm literally reading my own slide. Fan in, that's basically many clients are swamping a single client, like a DDoS, like the last speaker was talking about. Fan out, that's Nmap, basically. One to many. And then this last one's real cool. Like duplicate MAC addresses to one IP. All right, that's a cool one. It's like you got to scratch your head and think, like, how am I going to solve that one with Suricata? Well, I figured it out. I shocked myself, and we'll go into that here in a little bit. So, okay. So I saw Flappy Host, and I'm thinking Flappy Bird, so I just put the Flappy Bird on there. So host A sends a TCP SYN packet to host B. Host B, just like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. I acknowledge your SYN packet. And host A says, nah, I'm not talking to you. And then host A comes along again and says, hi. Host B says, how you doing? Host A, I'm not talking to you. But that's over and over and over and over and over again. And why could this happen? You can get a misconfiguration in some devices that'll cause this to happen, okay? And that's a bad day. That's a bad day for the target device because it's getting slammed. And you might want to see this. And, maybe an attacker would do this. It's possible, but chances are it's not an attacker. I work for a security company, but chances are it's not an attacker that's doing this. And so, there we go. Some people have been accused of writing elegant Suricata rules. I'm not one of those people. It's difficult for you all to see, but here's basically the way it works, okay? It's like a Rube Goldberg Suricata cascade. So rule 1. Rule 1's going to basically grab the SYN. It's going to set a state flag on the flow because these are flows. They're setting up. I see you. I respond back to you. And then, nah, I don't want to talk to you. So it sets a state flag on the flow. Rule 2 comes back from the respondent and says, okay, I acknowledge your SYN packet. Rule 3, it captures the reset. And then it sets an X bit. And for anybody who's like writing Suricata rules, X bits are great. That's where it's at. An X bit is like a global state flag that basically declares, okay, this thing happened. Suricata record that this thing happened, and then you can use this thing in memory and aggregate over time. And that's what Rule 4 does. It counts. I didn't realize how badly this. You guys can't read any of this. This is hieroglyphics. Rule 4 counts how many times this opened up, responded, and shut down. And then if there's 100 times, this flapping occurs 100 times within 5 seconds, it's going to alert. It's going to fire. And to prove that it fired, I went ahead and it went into my as an alert into my Eve log. Wazoo agent grabbed that, and shoved it here into OpenSearch, which is Elasticsearch, right? So we have our next scenario. It was a multicast storm. That's UDP packets. That's my multicast address, and it's just getting slammed. And again, the first 4 scenarios here are all thresholding. They're all thresholding the same way the first one was. So that's a single rule, elegantly handles this scenario. So this is the rule, which is an exception to the rule, which is kind of like saying the assistant to the regional manager. This rule is the exception to the rule, and it basically handles that threshold case nicely with UDP. So basically that rule says that the same source IP sends more than or equal 500 UDP packets to this IP address, this multicast address within 5 seconds, raise a storm alert. Now, is that going to apply to every environment? No. You're going to have to know your environment, and you're going to have to like enjoy looking at packets, which is I do, which is really weird. It's not a good thing. And then it fired, and the rule goes into wazoo. Fine. Fan in. It's like a DDoS, straight up like a DDoS. Okay, we're going to handle that with 2 rules. So rule 1, I'm tracking the full connections, because when those fan-ins come in, they come in, you get a SYN ACK, and then the ACK, right? And so that's a full connection. And that first rule comes in, and it basically tracks by source, right? The second rule is going to, and it sets an X bit. The second rule checks for the presence of the X bit, and then tracks by destination. So I have unique source in the first rule, unique destination in the second rule, and a threshold. Do I have 50 of those within 5 seconds? If I do, fire. And then fan out is exactly the same. This looks like Nmap. Like, I was looking at this, so here are my rules, and I was looking at that earlier today. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would detect an Nmap full connect scan from a single host running Nmap. And so, oh, wow, that's going to be a false positive. Well, it's not a false positive, but it's not a threat detection talk, so I don't want to detect Nmap. So how would I prevent myself from detecting Nmap? And the way I would do that is there's a little known secret. Nmap has a TCP window size of 1024. So I would just put in there TCP.window not equal 1024, and that will not detect Nmap. And so that's kind of elegant, I suppose, maybe a little bit. I'm really nervous because I dressed up today for the talk. And then rule 2, basically it's the same as the fan-in rule, but it's reversed on the way out. 50 or more within 5 seconds, fire, boom, fires. Now, here's where we get really creative. So duplicate MAC addresses, one IP address claiming multiple MAC addresses. So normally you'll see this one, .65, .70, .70, fine. You've got .72 and it's got 3 MAC addresses. That's pretty common actually in a network environment. I probably shouldn't talk about that now because I'm going to talk about that later, but I'll talk about that now. Networking devices, they can have multiple MAC addresses. Multi-home devices, they can have multiple MAC addresses. Virtualized devices, environments, they have multiple MAC addresses. How would you detect this with Suricata? I mean, the previous rules were all thresholding rules. You can't really do a thresholding rule here, but you have to get creative. So you got to have Suricata 8 for Ethernet for MAC addresses. So what's going to happen is you've got to go into your log file, and that little thing on the bottom says decode. You've got to enable decode in your suricata.yaml. And it's going to then, once you have it enabled, then you write a little heartbeat rule. And it's the simplest of all rules. It basically detects, only runs once every 10 minutes per IP source. It's basically going to detect when a SYN packet happens from a single IP every 10 minutes so you don't overload your records in Elasticsearch. When that runs, it's going to send a record to the Suricata's eve.json, its log file. And that's what that looks like. And you'll see in there it's got IP addresses and it's got MAC addresses. Now you need to have some way to evaluate that. So what I did was I used Python. I told an LLM to make a Python script for me, and it did, and it worked. And yeah, I know you all. Yeah, I did. Don't act like you don't too. So what that Python script does is it goes into the eve.json, and once every 24 hours, it jumps off where it was last read that log file at the byte offset. It starts reading it, and it looks over the last 24 hours, and it makes a map. It's going to make a map for every IP address, basically every IP address that it's seen and all of their MAC addresses. And if any IP address has 3 or 4 MAC addresses, or 3 or more MAC addresses, what it's going to do is it's going to inject its own record into eve.json. So it runs every 24 hours, picks up where it left off, looks at that suricata rule, heartbeat rule. It injects that back into eve.json. And remember, Wazoo is tailing that log file. As soon as it sees something there, it's going to alert on it, send it on over to Elasticsearch, OpenSearch. So false positives. I talked about that a little bit. Load balancers, network devices, virtualized environments. Mitigation. So is there anybody in here who doesn't know about Suricata datasets? Because they're super powerful. So in Suricata, it has this feature called a dataset. And datasets can take different information. One of the bits of information that it can take is a list of IP addresses. And so if you know your environment, you have a CMDB, like who actually has a CMDB, but if you have a CMDB, you have an asset list, and you know the devices that are doing this, you can add them to the data set. And when you add that snippet there in the Suricata rule, data set is not set, network devices, it will preclude the SYN packet. It'll preclude it from firing on this. So those are automatically excluded, so you can notch out or rule out those false positives. If you want to really level up, you could write a Suricata rule that does asset characterization, like it looks for packets, makes a determination, says, okay, this is what you are, you're a network device, and then you can have the Suricata rule automatically load the IP address of the asset it's characterized and stick that into a data set so you don't even have to deal with it, right? But I recommend looking at that data set, the contents once in a while, because you never know what's going to, if you go that route, you never know what's going to make its way in there. So these are my dashboards. Now, on the top left, I know it's hard for everybody, it's hard for me to see. These are all of my scenarios, and Wazoo, their severity ratings are from 0 to 15, and 15 is the highest. And on the bottom, I've got two of these duplicate MAC address events. There's a pie chart over there on the right. I made that, and that's like over the last 24 hours, how many of these I've got. There's a timeline at the bottom. You got the flapping events there every 30 minutes. Going across, I've got a couple storm events. I've got a fan in, a fan out on the bottom right. There's a little dot are those two duplicate IP address events. And here are the dashboards, like a little more closer in, flapping, storm, fan in, fan out. And I was trying to get fancy with the dashboards, but I'm not really a dashboard maker. Gotchas in this implementation. Suricata documentation, not bad, not great. I get the feeling that the folks who wrote the Suricata documentation are kind of like all in on their own joke, and they haven't really let anybody else in on the secret. It's not bad, but when you're looking for really esoteric stuff on how to do it, it's not easy to find. I mean, I couldn't do any better, so am I to talk, right? I don't. If you use AI to write any Suricata rules, AI is notorious for hallucinating. I've tried Claude Sonnet, I've tried ChatGPT 5, I've tried Grok, and then I've put the rules that one creates against the others, and they're like, that sucks, and they don't really say that, they're real polite, but they can't ever agree on anything. So AI will hallucinate if you try to use AI to write Suricata rules. Be careful of that. Wazoo's OpenSearch buttonology, it's not intuitive. So you're going to be fumbling around like I was. You'll be fumbling around like I was in order to kind of get your dashboards up and working. You make your visualizations and then you move them into a dashboard, and that's easy. But getting the visualizations up and running can be hard to do. Elasticsearch mapping, I had like a data field, which is the date, and that was like the @timestamp field, and it nested itself under this structure called data. So it was data.@timestamp, and then I had to tell Elasticsearch that this was a date, and then fine, I did that, and then Elasticsearch is like, it's not in the proper date format. It's like, come on, you gotta be kidding me, please. And then false positives. If you use these rules, like if you can get my slides, you can ping me on LinkedIn, I'll give you the slides. They're going to false positive, probably false positive. You've got to have these specific to your environment, which means that you or somebody that you can bribe is going to have to know how to look at PCAPs and know how to write Suricata rules. But what you do is super powerful. On that note, if you would like me to write you Suricata rules, you give me your firstborn PCAP, and I will write you a Suricata rule for that PCAP. Just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to. I don't know, I love this stuff. So it's really weird. So tune. You'll deploy your rules. They're going to come back as false positives, and you're going to have to tune them. And that is the name of that game. And that was a fast talk, but hey, I have some other visualizations from the dashboards and stuff. But are there any questions? Yes.
So we've been building out a in-the-moment forensic server that'll launch all these things. For example, Suricata, Security Onion, Wazoo.
Wazoo.
Is it Wazoo?
Wazoo, yeah, like up the wazoo, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was messing
Yeah,
with
I
it
don't know
the
why.
whole time.
I don't make these.
Yeah.
I don't make these names, right? Like
then-
Suricata, and I don't make these names.
And then we import all of the latest IOCs and IOAs from ransomware.live, for example,
Yeah.
into it with all the Yara and YAML rules.
Okay, cool.
Have you built out something like that, or like if your setup is like that, what else are you using as far as integrations with things that are APIs, threat intelligence feeds that feeds into that?
So I can speak for the Dragos platform. This will incorporate threat intel, by the way. Wazoo will do it, and it does it through the IOCs. There's an IOC file, and for example, sticks and other things. It will incorporate that format, so it'll bring them in. I haven't seen the Wazoo dashboard for that. That sounds like something pretty cool, but it'll incorporate that. So there's a pre-formatted config file, and you just ossec.conf, and you point it to that output in a pre-formatted like sticks format or whatever, and it'll bring all that stuff in, and they have pre-made visualizations. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so then the next step from there is if there's something that actually gets popping hot, and it's multiple things popping hot, what are the next things that you launch as far as open source? Are you using CAPE, like Eric Zimmerman tools, to go and grab artifacts or investigation data forensics files, logs, and pulling it into a forensic server like your own self?
So I can speak. So I haven't gotten that far personally, but I can speak for the Dragos platform. They have a capability in which if a thing is of a severity threshold or higher, it will take a PCAP. So they have like a rolling pre-10-minute PCAP. So they are taking a rolling PCAP for the last 10 minutes. And if something pops off, it will grab that like 5-tuple, whatever the 5-tuple was, and it'll store that. It'll store that, the capture for that. Yeah. It'll save it off, zip it up, and then it'll be like, hey, here's the PCAP with this alert, which is cool. Then I get to look at it and then say, okay, why did my rule fire when it shouldn't have? Normally. What's that? Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Not that advanced. I wish. Yeah, being totally honest. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh yeah, there's one in the middle.
Hi. So the question about Wazoo and OpenSearch. These open source tools, their disadvantage is a drastic amount of admin overhead for their tuning. And isn't it better to use some paid tool, like I don't say it's Splunk, but similar, but cheaper, and that has some AI capabilities to make filtering instead of manually tuning. And the second question is this use case that you just described with like 4 type of alerts alerts.
The scenario?
Yeah, the scenario. Like how, by the severity level, how these scenarios is compared to other scenarios like, I don't know, compromised IAM key or something else?
So compared to a threat, I would say compared to an actual intrusion, these are probably of lower severity, but in terms of how common they are, much more common. So as the severity goes up from the intrusion, the commonality decreases. Okay, so like a breach, right? That's not as common. But as the commonality increases, you're getting this type of stuff all the time. And so it's a trade-off. It's probably a trade-off for the business risk owners and the business managers in that regard. And using something open source, probably good for small enterprise. Probably not good for a utility that's $1 billion utility, unless you want to roll your own. But if you do want to roll your own, I know how to do it.
Yeah. Typically I've been doing SIMs for 30 years.
Yeah,
a lot of this type of traffic is pre-filtered from a SIM, because if you took all of this traffic into the SIM, very expensive. So, and the fact that you're paying by the terabyte in order to be able to process things. So typically the logs like this would never get into the SIM in the first place, just because most organizations don't have the money, the licensing, or the storage to be able to accomplish it. That's what I've seen a lot. The other thing is, by doing it this way, you'll learn a lot more. If you allow a vendor's AI to do it, you're not learning anything.
You learn a lot more about your own environment, that's for sure.
Yes.
You learn about the
absolutely.
problematic hosts. Yeah, the problem children in the environment, you learn about them real fast.
Real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I've done this, and I've got PCAPs from some devices, and it's like, why is it doing this? And then one was the Windows host, and I went in there, and then I had to look up the netstat, outbound communications, and then I took a PCAP off of the host, and then try to find the actual process ID of the process that's doing this. It's crazy stuff, and then track that down, and then okay, can we kill that? No, we can't kill that, and so then you have some mitigation on the thing. At least the environment, at least the management knows about it, which is they know what's going on, and like, getting the answers is really what people want. Yes.
So, with what you say, I feel that it's more important to have an engineer that can do this stuff than having the tool without an engineer. Like, because if you buy a tool and don't have somebody who can manage or use it, or even open source tools, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I'm not going to come up here and be like, hey, here's how awesome I am. Like, for people who want to geek out on this, like, this is one way to do it. I'm not saying it's the way to do it. It's one way to do it. So for people, if you got somebody who really wants to geek out on this, God help them. This is one way of doing it. Whoever that person is has to probably be able to withstand getting kicked in the butt constantly, technically, when it comes to this, and then persevering through that, because that's really what detection engineering is. I could have another talk about detection engineering. It's you get these abstract problem sets. Like, you would approach somebody and say, this thing is, like, here's the abstract problem. This device is going down. Why? Well, I don't know. So you then have to get artifacts. You've got to get telemetry. You've got to have somebody who can look at the packet captures, who actually wants to look at the packet capture. That's something else entirely. Yeah, look at the packet captures, then see if they can discern a pivot, a handhold within the capture itself, within the packets themselves, that they could then detect on reliably. That's not going to false negative and false positive. So it's a lot to ask, and that's a research project. And so if you wanted it done like yesterday, that's probably not going to happen. But to your point, yes, you need somebody who's really zealous about this kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I can totally see this being used as anomaly detection as well, right? Like,
Sure.
what happens at 12:01 every Thursday?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
why am I getting a memory leak at this time? Or what's this activity where my audit logs are being deleted, where just general apps aren't going to give me more context? At least this will pave the path towards further analysis, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think to amplify what you said, for any environment, so let me back up. I'm very leery. I work for a security company. I'm very leery of any entity that goes to another entity and says, I have your perfect solution that's going to work right out of the box.
Yeah.
I'm not
saying that. I'm saying
no. I know. I'm walking along with you here.
Yeah.
That would be the Python scripts that are tuned to your environment, right? Maybe the main or the logic in the Python scripts is generally sound, but that's going to have to be the parameters in the Python scripts that first has to get the telemetry from the Eve log to then make sense of it and then spit it out back to you and say, okay,
give you some context. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree, 99% of us in this room, it's the threat actors are laying off the land, and we have to we have to have some tool to detect that.
I absolutely am terrified of public speaking, but I'm actually speaking at DISC at Dragos on living off the land, how we're detecting that. So that's in November. Yeah, Maryland, in November. So yeah, it was a terrifying experience. You all are very nice people. It's a very terrifying experience.
And speaking of living off the land, the Nmap, I would actually, with the SIM stuff that I've done, I would not put in the Nmap
Window size?
window size, because
Yeah.
what you're saying is now anybody can run Nmap.
They
What
can.
you want to do is say, this machine is allowed to run Nmap. If anybody else does,
Yep.
tell me now.
Yep.
Because they shouldn't.
Yeah, no, true. NPing, all sorts of mass scan. Mass scan has a window size of 1024 as well, in case anybody want to know. I don't know. Thank you.
Awesome.
I thought it was cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.